order to follow the South Bay Lakers with Bronny James playing, you have to only watch the South Bay Lakers when they play at home, because he's only playing at home while he's in the G League, because the South Bay Lakers fly commercial for security reasons. With that being said, they had plenty of security for the opening part of the NBA season, where he's appeared in 5 games of the 16-game season, didn't play well. They had their, the parade and the photo ops, and I, for one, was like, man, you know what? Just get this out of the way. Do it early in the season, and then we move on. He's where he should be for development. If it's not going to be college basketball, at least it's in the G League. But development's not happening at the rate it could, because he's not actually a full-time player on the team. He's just part-time whenever they play at home. Charles Barkley agrees with practically everyone in the sports world and fans across the globe, for that matter, that this is a LeBron James created predicament, not a Bronny James created situation. And he joined the Better Angle podcast to weigh in.
Chuck, speaking of gambling, a lot of people bet on Bronny James for Rookie of the Year. I mean, a big name like Bronny, of course, he's going to attract a lot of bets. I don't think that's going to come to fruition, but just in terms of how LeBron and the Lakers have handled this whole situation, what are your thoughts on that?
You've handled it awful. Awful. I thought it was because it was so fun. I was taping that match with Ken Griffey Jr. about way before the season started. He was telling me him and his dad were gonna go out for that first game, and then I was with my foolish friends later, you think Bronny's gonna make the opening day roster? I'm like, there's 100% chance. There's no way in the world Nike is flying Ken Griffey Sr. and Jr. out there, and Bronny don't get on the court with his dad.
Right, and his dad's not gonna let him play.
First of all, that's a Nike commercial waiting to happen. That's waiting to happen. But I thought it was great, a little ceremonial first game. But the kid's not ready to play in the NBA, and he should be in the G League, and so he can play basketball. He's not going to get better sitting on the bench. But also this thing where he's only going to play home games.
That's wild. Not traveling with the team.
It's it's wild. If you mean stupid,
yes,
because it's not fair to him. It's not fair to the team. Can you imagine a coach of that team? Like, you come off a road trip and there's a player you ain't seen in a week or two, and then you feel like you probably got to play him. So I don't think they're doing Bronny any favors, and they just handled this thing really bad. It's a bad look for the Lakers. It's a bad look for the Lakers. I actually think it's a bad look for I really like everything LeBron's done, but this is a bad look for him, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bad look whenever he's on the court as well. He's looked up the stats before the show. He's yet to hit a three-point shot, and he's averaging, 28 minutes per game at home and 5 points.
5 points per game.
Yeah. This isn't ideal for Bronny James in his development either. Not traveling because of security reasons on United Airlines. That's what they use in the G League. Where I guess the security was better at USC than it is for the South Bay Lakers. If that's the case, if that's the reason, what's he doing in the NBA? He's going to transfer anyway. Go to a higher level security clearance for another program in college basketball. But this isn't about Bronny. This whole thing was about LeBron. He wanted to play with his son before he's out, and he made it happen. And he appeared more than just that one game. They got their photo op, and, I mean, who's to say we won't see him again? I certainly believe we will. It'll be in a Lakers uniform whenever LeBron wants it to be. And I doubt Bronny is all about this. He said publicly that his dream wasn't to play with LeBron, his dad. His dream was to play in the NBA. This isn't the path to get there. And he's not improving because he's not playing every game. What do you think the other players in South Bay Lakers think about this?
Well, they hate him. They hate the whole situation. As I often do, I'm about to mention a couple of movies when I describe what's going on here.
Okay.
One is a late 90s classic, Varsity Blues. And we've all seen it. We all love it. The scene where Jonathan Moxon is passionately telling his father that, I don't want your life. I feel like this could be Bronny James, knowing that he's never going to be as good as his dad, but LeBron just desperately wants him to have his life and to be an NBA star or at least have an NBA career, when in fact, Bronny James might be better suited going to Brown University to study law or whatever Jonathan Moxon ended up doing with his life and where he was going to go graduate in the Ivy League. I don't know. I don't get a sense that anybody knows who Bronny James really is. And why? It's because the second movie I'm going to reference, 2001's Bubble Boy with Jake Gyllenhaal. That's Bronny James in a nutshell. The kid has lived in a bubble his entire life. A bubble created by his super wealthy, super famous father. And the bubble continues. The kid can't travel commercial? That's the reason we're giving?
According to Brian Windhorst.
I mean, you could have a security person from the Lakers go with him if that's a big problem. Do I really think that Bronny James is going to get hassled so much? There are countless celebrities who travel commercial or who are in airports all over the world. And they might have a security guard with them. They may not. Bronny James is not special enough to not be able to travel commercial. You could put security with him if it makes you feel safer and helps you sleep at night. LeBron. But he has been set up for both success and failure. And what I mean by this is there's no way that Bronny James is ultimately going to fail in life because he has the security net of what so many rich and famous kids have. Or I should say, children of the rich and famous across the world. They've got the safety net of money, of their parents, of who their father is or their mother is. Bronny's going to be fine, everybody. He's going to be just fine. He could do anything that he wants. It just so happens to be he likes playing basketball. So his dad has now orchestrated a system where his son, and as you heard, one of the top 50 players all time, Charles Barkley, just said, not ready to play in the NBA, not an NBA player. But a system has been set up by his father to ensure that he is an NBA player. It's not going to help him in the long run. It doesn't help the Lakers right now. It doesn't help Bronny right now. It doesn't help the South Bay Lakers right now. It doesn't help his clout with his teammates on either the Los Angeles Lakers or the South Bay Lakers. Charles Barkley's 1,000% correct. This is not good for anybody involved. And I hate it because I don't see where Bronny's a bad guy in any way. I'm not rooting against him.
No, I think he's
think
a hard worker.
He's Bubble Boy, right? He doesn't know what it's like to be in the real world, and nor should he. Well, most people that are born into that don't really know what it's like to be in the real world. Well, and sure, he's no exception.
But it's not like he wasn't letting us know that he was getting the nepotism type treatment at USC. You know, he was underneath the radar there too. Now we can talk about on the court. I'm saying just period, right? Like it sounded like he was just a part of the team.
Yeah.
And now he's a part of this charade. That's the difference.
We also don't,
and I don't think he wanted this to go the way it has. Because who would? I mean, you're only playing home games. Because you can't travel commercial because of security reasons. My guess is the guy. I mean, he's flown commercial at some point. I mean, he's traveled alone somewhere. You don't think he's gone like with his friends somewhere and done something like? What about Bryce? What about the other son who plays? Is he unable to travel for games?
I would love to hear from Bronny because we keep saying kid, and he is.
He's LeBron's kid.
He's basically a teenager, maybe 20 years old, so he's still an adult by legal definition, but still kind of a kid. I'd like to hear more from him on this because, and again, no one can 100% say what they would do in someone else's shoe. I'll tell you what I would be thinking if I were him. I would fight against, I'm only here because I'm LeBron's son. And at the very least, I'd make sure everyone who was around me knew that I was working my ass off to be a part of the team and to show that I was going to do whatever it took to get on the court and to have success. And in doing that, I'd probably hop on a United flight to go to somewhere in the Midwest to play a G League game, and I would refuse whatever my father was telling me to do. I want to play with that team on the road. But I don't know if he's fighting that or not.
Well, you mentioned bubble. The bubble itself is. I mean, he's hearing from his dad who thinks that his daughter is in danger because Trump's going to be the president again.
Yeah.
That's what
they don't. He wasn't
in the bubble.
And this is part of what I'm saying. He wasn't raised in reality, the way most people know what reality is.
Sure, but like there have been others who haven't been raised in reality. Ken Griffey Jr. He's normal. He was raised with a father that was in Major League Baseball. Now, not on the level he was.
I'm not saying Bronny's not like a bad guy or abnormal. I'm saying the whole
it's just about
situation is abnormal because of LeBron.
Yeah, that's it.
And
his billionaire father.
The kid doesn't know any better because he doesn't know anything. Because he's bubble boy. Because he's grown up in a world of you have everything you want, everywhere you go, everybody knows who your dad is, and you're going to get preferential treatment because of that. Let's flip that with LeBron's upbringing. He's raised by a single mom in poor Akron, Ohio, and is a phenom basketball player. But he had to struggle as a child and as a teenager growing up, and then he reaps all the rewards of his success and talent.
Then he's playing on ESPN as a high school player.
Which is great, right. But he grew up into that world also. Bronny is he's LeBron's kid.
Well, LeBron's been flying private since he was 18 when he was drafted. You know what I mean? Like, and from the other perspective, I mean, this is more about LeBron than Bron. Think about the other billionaire kids who have been out there, like just under the radar. I'm saying, or you've got the son or daughter of a professional athlete that do their own thing and carve their own path. Jerry Rice's son was an undrafted player in the NFL draft this past. I mean, is he in danger of some way of traveling around? No. So it's a LeBron-created thing, not a Bronny. We haven't talked to Bronny since he last played for the Lakers.
No, and that's why I'd love to hear from him because I would love to know his true feelings about all this. Because I would hope that he is thinking to himself, I want to work hard and play as much as I can, even on the G League team, and I'm being told I can't.
The last thing that is
by the organization
is he's just embracing the fact that he gets to improve. That's the way this quote is set up. Quote, I've seen all the buzz from me going to the G. It's just an amazing experience for me to go out and play my game and get some minutes under me. I'm excited for it. That was the only quote that is in a story that references why he's not traveling on the road. And the games are a lot more expensive to attend whenever he's playing. They're selling out those games, which is interesting. And it makes me think of the WNBA that was clamoring for the private flights too, the charters.
Yeah.
The South Bay Lakers, if you look up their roster, it's a bunch of players that won't scratch the NBA.
But that are all better than Bronny.
Sure. That did it,
that are having to
that went about the path that they needed to.
Fight tooth and nail to get everything they can to try to have a shot to be the 12th man on an NBA roster at the end of a bench.
The media members that cover him, and I'm going to say this knowing that, I'm not naive to think that they don't cover him in a positive light. We've seen that firsthand with how the draft went and how that played out on ESPN. But the media that covers him, even with the South Bay Lakers, say that he works hard and he's actually committed to the sport. That's all well and good, but Chad, we're not even seeing it's always the surface level about LeBron more than it is Bronny. And that's, in some cases, that's on the media to tell the story instead of sitting on page 2 of the book, right?
And they're not going to do that because they want the favoritism of LeBron James.
Yeah,
they want to gain his favor at all times.
No doubt. Like whenever he is
the king and the kingmaker.
Bronny is done with the debut in the NBA. The photo ops are over, and we're watching Bronny in warm-ups hit threes, and that's the highlight reel for Bronny James.
And that's the only place you can catch him hitting threes because he hasn't done that yet in the G League. Not a single one.
You can catch Dan Hurley going off on officiating.
He doesn't hold back. He's not worried about fines.
No, he did not. He's played the tournament game against against Memphis, and he's upset with the foul call that he believes that the two-time champ shouldn't receive.
But I had a lot of issues with what went on out there in the game. That over the back call at that point of the game, there was no attempt to block out. There was a player on Memphis that made a half-ass effort to rebound that basketball, and Liam McNeely high-pointed that rebound. For that call to be made at that point of the game was a complete joke. All right. And then for me, I don't know what happened. I might have lost my balance by the absurdity of the call, or maybe I tripped. But if I made that call at that point, I would have ignored the fact that I was on my back. If I made that call, I would have ignored that. I would have ignored that. That was a major, obviously a major. How you could call that while that game was going on, the way that game was going on, is just beyond me. But I know, I've never seen the one ref before. I didn't even know he was a college ref. And then, I'm familiar with the other two, so I'm not surprised.
That's fantastic.
Didn't even know he was a college ref.
Burn. Before we get to just the depth of this, just blatant and awesome honesty. There sits a man that turned down the Los Angeles Lakers job.
Mm-hmm.
You think he would be putting up with Bronny James and LeBron James right now?
No.
Given the fact that he doesn't put up with a bad call?
Probably part of
Maui?
the reason he ended up not taking the job, honestly, is
Right.
because of that.
Right. He ends up getting paid less, and he gets big money, and he's the face of college basketball.
I love how Dan Hurley speaks in a press conference the way Tom Hanks does in A League of Their Own when he's trying not to scream. We're gonna need you to hit the cutoff man before next season.
He needs
I need you to work on that if you would, please.
He just needs Copenhagen now.
Yeah, he's trying to make himself not go ballistic.
Yeah.
I probably fell from the absurdity of the call that was being made. I didn't know the one gentleman was even a college ref. I love Dan Hurley. It's hilarious. Is it over the top? Yes. Did he cost his team yesterday? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a tie game when that happened, and I looked up. We're kind of keeping an eye on it while we're doing the show here, and I see Memphis shooting 4 free throws with no one around, and the game turned at that point. So you got to cool it a little bit. It was over the back. I've watched the play a few times. By definition, I mean, he says half-assed effort by the Memphis guy. I've seen worst-ass efforts to get a rebound before.
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't the worst I've seen. The guy at least was backing in to the UConn player, moving back to get a body on him, and the UConn player does go over the top of him to tip it back to himself. Now, in a physical game like that,
and we don't know how it was called.
In overtime, I can understand.
Right.
A whistle blows in that moment. You think you've got to put back on a rebound, and they call that.
It's a great game, too.
It would piss off any fan, any coach, any player. I understand that, but by letter of the law, it was an over the back from what I saw. And it wasn't the worst effort I've seen from Memphis on the play, the way it made it sound.
It ends the 17-game winning streak that dates back to last season for UConn. I mean, that reaction in November tells me exactly why UConn is where they are.
And it tells you exactly why Penny Hardaway said post-game, it's the biggest game in my career. It's the biggest win in a long time for Memphis. In November in Hawaii.
Yep.
And he's right. You knock off UConn, you've accomplished something. So kudos to Memphis on that win. And anytime we get a Dan Hurley soundbite like that one, it's perfection.
There was another double technical, a third technical that was called in this game.
Yeah, there was some pushing and shoving. They did
I love that.
They ejected 2 guys, one for UConn, one from Memphis. They both got the double tech and ejected, but there were no free throws that happened after that. But Memphis holds on, and that was after UConn, down 3 seconds remaining, hit a big 3 to tie it to get it to overtime, and then the madness ensued.
So maybe these officials were just picked out of somewhere in Hawaii.
Could be. Could be a local Chaminade, scrimmage game official of some sort.
Maybe.
Does Chaminade still participate in this tournament?
I think they do.
They always get the spot as the host team. They must have played in the game that I haven't seen. I've seen 3 of the games.
How do we not hear about Chaminade ever except for this tournament?
Yeah, they need to get, because they're like Division II.
But I never even
they're not even Division I program.
I don't even see them on the road for a possible betting now.
Yeah, I don't think Division II you can bet on
even on the road
often.
Against Division I.
I don't
like in
think
October, November.
I don't think they play a lot of games against Division I, but I could be wrong. I'm not sure that's happened a lot for them.
I mean, we've got to place. There's going to be an offshore account that we can place a bet on Chaminade. Yesterday, I grabbed the money line. It was like UConn was plus 600 with, what was it, 20-something seconds left, guys? And
down 3.
Down 3. They hit the 3. But then I was like, UConn's +6. When am I ever going to see this again? I'll take it. Down 3 with the possession. At least it was on the app. And
then Dan Hurley went nuts and
Dan
lost you
Hurley,
the game.
Tripped on his way, turning away from the foul call. Just tripped, just slipped and fell. It's quite the acting job. He did better there than sometimes I see with the flopping in the NBA prior to the new rules that were set up.
Yeah. I'm trying to do so no Chaminade this year in the field.
They went under.
Michigan State beat Colorado, beat them pretty easily. You had
Then when we play them.
Memphis beat UConn, as we just talked about. Carolina survived Dayton. Dayton hit a 3 that looked like they tied the game, but they went back and reviewed, and he had a toe barely on the line with seconds remaining, so they ended up losing by 2 or 3 points. And then Auburn, in a great game, beats Iowa State. Auburn has 2 wins away from home against top 5 teams already. They won at Houston, and they beat number 4 Iowa State. They were down Hutton 16 at halftime. I'm watching that game up until half. I turn it off. Auburn's getting blown out. Wake up this morning to see that Auburn won.
Who won the fight on the flight? Do we know?
Don't know. I think it was a King of the Ring style this time. 11 men enter, one leaves.
So Chaminade's not participating based on the volcano or whatever. Or excuse me, the wildfires.
But they have the tournament there with the
no,
wildfires going on?
They moved it.
Okay.
It says it returns, Maui Invitational Basketball Tournament returns to Hawaii in midst of community recovery effort.
Okay.
So
I wonder who the last-minute replacement was. Colorado? Because they had to get someone in there to play to get the 8-team field.
Anyway,
it's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I'm curious though because I was like, oh, did their basketball teams not? Did they just go under?
They fold
because I don't hear about them at all unless it's now. So, I did like during the Manningcast they're promoting the tip-off right after the Manningcast. They just hold tip-off until after Monday Night Football.
Manningcast was good.
It was
last
very
night. The Owen and Luke Wilson are 2 of the most likable dudes in all of
Agreed.
Hollywood, and they were really funny.
Mike Vrabel was great. Belichick every week they do this is awesome.
He's good.
I mean that's where you see the behind the camera aspect or behind the closed door coaches meeting with the quarterback, and how he sets up Peyton and Eli is very good because he knows the answer. And he's like, Peyton, what would you do here? Or what do you think about Riverside? Why do we call this Riverside? He references something from General Neyland at Tennessee. But knowing the answer, and it's a great setup for a great story. That's what makes that Manningcast great. And then you get some guests who have some good stories that will toe the line on whether or not they can tell these things. Did you see, though, where Belichick's, at one point, he holds up the sheet of paper, and it's an email, and it's Manningcast questions. He's got them all listed.
Oh, well, you can tell they'll go down to their notes, and sometimes they're reading a direct quote. They're like, all right, Luke Wilson, in 2004, you were in old school, and you could tell they've got stuff ready to go.
But you can see who forwarded the email to Belichick? Matt Patricia. So I guess Matt Patricia, who's doing the podcast with Belichick.
Really?
I guess
he's also his secretary?
I guess. Like it went through Patricia to get to Belichick.
That's hilarious.
Yes.
Matt Patricia was a head coach in the NFL, and he's Bill Belichick's secretary right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to need you to just email Matt. He'll forward all that to me. In fact, he might print it off for me and then bring it to my home. And then my 24-year-old girlfriend will meet him at the door, take the documents to me, and then I'll be ready to go on the Manningcast.
And he was helping with Mac Jones at the end of everything.
What a life for Belichick right now. That guy's living it up.
Yeah, it's
Owen Wilson's story about the video of Urban Meyer at a celebrity flag football game where he was the coach, and Owen Wilson goes up to talk to him. He says, "Do I know you? Who are you?" And Owen Wilson goes, "I'm on your team." That's so great.
Well, then Vrabel said something like that. By the way, there's an image of Belichick holding up the paper. I don't know if we can find that, but we could show it. But Vrabel even said something about Urban Meyer. You have a great Urban Meyer story, too.
Yeah, Urban Meyer was an absolute dickhead to me. This was back in 2000. This is fresh off of Texas winning the national title.
First impression.
So this was 2005. I remember I was hosting a show where we had, that day on the show, Jim Tressel, Mac Brown, who had just won the national title, Philip Fulmer, who was coaching at Tennessee at the time. It was a national coaches convention. We are at the old Opryland Hotel here in Nashville, and I'm just trying to book interviews for the show that I'm working at the time. I'm in my mid-20s, and I'm waiting on Urban Meyer to finish up a conversation. He's talking with a woman and a man across from him, and you could tell it's like his sports information director from Florida that's standing next to him, and I'm waiting, kind of trying to get the cue that they're not talking anymore, and the moment they're done talking, I say, Coach Meyer, hello, my name is Chad Withrow. I'm with such and such radio station here in Nashville. The man looks at my hand. I mean, does not look at me, looks at my hand, does not shake it, and he says, who, can't you see we're talking to someone here? That I'm talking to somebody? I mean, this was 5 seconds of silence. The group had moved on to talk to someone else, and his response was to look at my hand, not shake it, and said, can't you see I'm having a conversation here? And that was that. That was my Urban Meyer interaction.
So good.
Wasn't great.
Here's the email. Here's the email to Belichick with the Manningcast questions. And if you see right below the second paragraph there with the forwarded message, it says Matt Patricia. From Matt Patricia.
Yeah. Well, let's just say that all the stories about Urban Meyer last night, none of them surprised me.
No.
None of them surprised me.
Chad, are you going
I'm sure he's lovely to people that he likes or respects.
Yeah, Dan Dockich.
I don't know that he's always, pleasant to
nice
strangers.
He's the only man that Urban Meyer's nice to.
I mean, and he goes on with Dan, and it's like,
Great.
two buddies at a barbecue.
It's like a Manningcast.
When they're on. Yeah, it's terrific.
It's like a Manningcast.
I think Urban's good on TV when he's on there, too. I'm sure people on the television set, may like him. My interaction was not as great.
No.
And here's the other thing. He would have no recollection of that happening either. None. Wouldn't remember it one bit, nor should he.
He doesn't remember coaching at Florida.
I was a peon. I still am.
Doesn't remember Aaron Hernandez.
Well,
doesn't remember it.
He would like to not remember him. So would Bill Belichick.
Hey,
something him and Urban Meyer and Bill Belichick have in common. They don't want to remember Aaron Hernandez.
Chad, you mentioned you're not surprised that Urban Meyer wouldn't remember something. You're not going to be surprised if we see a 3-loss SEC team in the playoff when it's all said and done?
No, not at all. So yesterday we come on the show, and we're talking a lot about all these elimination games of all these SEC teams. They've been eliminated with a 3rd loss. Alabama being the most prominent of those teams. They get blown out by Oklahoma on the road Saturday night. Then I get to watching some television, and I get to reading some things, and something really jumped out to me. Heather Dinich, who is the insider for the college football playoff for ESPN, that ESPN that has the rights, by the way, to the college football playoff, suddenly there's these articles. Could a 3-loss Alabama team make the playoff? Here's the route for 3-loss teams to make the playoff. I'm watching SportsCenter this morning. I'm seeing Heather Dinich on there. Heather Dinich makes a point to say, I've got Alabama 12th in my latest ranking. So there's not much that needs to happen to get them into the playoff. And then I'm thinking to myself, do we really think there's going to be a world where only 3 SEC teams are in? I really think they're going to find a way to get 4 in, especially if that 4th is a brand like Bama. Because here's what we know. Television always wins. The media rights partner always finds a way to win. Now, I'm not saying ESPN execs are making calls or fixing games or talking to refs or anything like that. I'm just saying it always seems to find a way to work out where they have the argument they want to make. It was Alabama over Florida State a year ago because Florida State's quarterback was hurt, and they knew Alabama was going to be a bigger draw with Nick Saban, and they got his final game. And you get the Alabama brand also. I really think they're going to find a way to get Alabama or another 3-loss SEC team in. And here's probably the route it's going to happen. SMU and Miami are going to be ahead of Alabama, Ole Miss, all the 3-loss teams. One of those two will lose in the ACC championship game. And it's going to come down to, would you take the 3-loss SEC team or the 2-loss ACC team that did not win the conference title? And I believe that the SEC team will win that argument with the playoff committee.
Or A&M.
Or A&M.
They win back-to-back games.
Or Ole Miss. I just think that the biggest partner of the SEC being ESPN, with all they do, the more I thought about I laid out yesterday the scenario where there could be 2 teams from the SEC and 3 from the ACC or whatever, maybe. We're going to get to the end of this, and I really don't see a scenario where the biggest conference attached to the biggest sports network doesn't get at least 4 teams in.
And I feel the same way.
Some way it's going to happen.
And same thing for the Big Ten.
And also, same thing for Notre Dame.
Well,
Notre Dame's not getting left out, regardless of what happens to USC.
This goes back to my point last week.
They're not going to allow it.
Notre Dame, and the ones leading and put this together, the SEC and the Big Ten, Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti said this last week. Notre Dame made concessions in order to be a part of this. A one-loss Notre Dame is getting in, no matter who they're playing, because they're taking nearly $10 million less per year in the guarantees. And they've already conceded that, no, we won't take the bye. Why is that important? Because Notre Dame and that fan base is watching Notre Dame football for an extra week, potentially, and they're likely hosting a game. So you get the big-time audience of Notre Dame for a far cheaper price, and it's a much larger audience for that football game. They're going to be a part of it. And I brought up the whole percentage chance and the AI models. For everyone thinking there's confusion in that room, I think there's actual clarity. They do this for the hype. It's been now 3 consecutive weeks where Alabama fans thought they were out, Georgia fans thought they were out, Tennessee fans thought they were out. This week it's back to Bama, and now a 3-loss team. If you're one of those, A&M fans, they just lost to Auburn. But they have Texas coming up with a chance to get in. Like, it's a great model as long as I think you realize the game that's being played. Because the final bracket will be the way that the ESPN model wants it to be. And, Chad hit it. I mean, it's the ratings game here. But also, the 12-team playoff allows for the drama. We wouldn't have had the same type of drama that we had for Ole Miss, Florida, or what we saw with Bama and Oklahoma. Given what we would have seen last year, these teams would have already been eliminated. They've been an afterthought. So there's the good and the bad with all this. But the conferences that have the drama are the SEC and the Big Ten for that reason. Because they're battling over a 4th team or a 5th team last week compared to your one bid league, Big 12. The only way I think, Chad, that we wouldn't have this set up, given the upsets, I'm saying the SEC upsets, is if Colorado would have won. Because then there's or BYU. Then there's some, a created brand of Dion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and again,
now you don't have that.
Well, going back to where the SEC, it just feels like ESPN and the SEC will still be winners in all of this.
Yeah.
The one scenario that would be terrible for them, let's say Georgia loses to Georgia Tech, Tennessee loses to Vanderbilt. Now you got Georgia with 3 losses, Tennessee with 3 losses. The only team you have left is 1 loss, Texas. Let's say they lose to A&M. Now A&M's got 3 losses. They're going to play Georgia in the SEC championship game at that point. Texas is sitting there with 2 losses with no great wins at that point. And you've got a mess. And then it gets real difficult to sift through all those 3-loss teams and start arguing over 1-loss Big Ten teams or even a 2-loss Notre Dame.
You're right.
Or 2-loss ACC loser. That's the doomsday scenario. Because right now, if what Vegas thinks will happen, which didn't happen last week, but if what Vegas thinks will happen happens, with Georgia beating Georgia Tech, Tennessee beating Vanderbilt on Saturday, then you're going to have, regardless of A&M and Texas, you're going to have 3 SEC teams with 2 losses or less that are locks, I believe, virtual locks at that point to get in. And then you could have an A&M Georgia championship game if A&M beats Texas at home. There's a lot to still play out, but it just like I said last week, it's going to work itself out. When Tennessee fans were so upset about everything, I'm thinking it's going to work out where if they just went out, they're going to get in. I feel the same way about the SEC. I feel like somehow, some way, it's going to work out for the conference. And it's going to work out for ESPN. I
haven't seen the odds released this week, but I'm sure they're out there sifting through it. Last week, though, I brought up how it shifted by a half team. It was over under 4.5 for the SEC prior to last week's kickoffs to get in, how many teams they'd have represented. And then it dropped by half a point. So it was over under 4. And the half point went to the ACC before Saturday's kickoffs. and now now they could get 2, right? Like it's interesting how Vegas also knows, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. Here's something else, and we'll see this tonight and come back tomorrow and talk about what we're going to see with this. But I hate the idea of conference versus conference foe in the first round of that, especially rematches. In the first round of that playoff,
Yeah.
There's no way to guard against it. But everything I'm seeing right now is Tennessee going back to Athens in the first round of the playoff. And we just saw that game, a month before. At that point, I just want different conferences playing each other. Those are the matchups we would love to see, a Georgia and Penn State or Tennessee, Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Teams you don't normally see go head-to-head. That's what I want to see in that first round.
Yes.
I know beggars can't be choosers because we're getting a 12-team playoff that most wanted.
Yeah.
But I hate the idea. Indiana versus Penn State in the first round would be a bummer.
Don't you think they'll slot some teams based on that? They say they won't. They say they won't. They also say they're not going to count up the championship games against
Who's undefeated in all this? TV. So, yes, I think they'll slot things the way they want it.
Yeah.
I think it'll magically – they will have a formula to talk their way, and Ward Manuel will discuss it in a way that makes you believe it, but they're going to have a way to avoid those rematches.
Believe it.
Oh, believe it.